Hello, Planets.nu. This is Tailspin, and this is a presentation for PlanetsCon 2021. And it's a little rough because the con is tomorrow, and I'm just trying to throw it together really quickly. So this is Tailspin's take on planetary defenses. The image in the background is from an earlier version of VJ Planets, and that is the defense post. I love that image. All right, so I'm going to talk about three things. I'm going to talk about hiding your outposts, early game defenses, and mid to end game defenses. I did have to cut a bit of stuff because this is a pretty long and complicated topic. So hiding sweet spots, and that's not talking about hiding your sweet spots. It's talking about the sweet spots of defense posts, like how many defense posts you should use to hide. Okay, so first things to note is that you can't hide from Dark Sense. They've seen everything. They know what's going on. You can't stop Dark Sense unless you're the rebels. Second thing to note is that scan range does not give ownership details, and the censorship mission must be activated. And so what that means is that a ship can't run around minesweeping, cloaked, or doing some other mission. They have to activate, they have to purposely use sensor sweep to look for your planets and other information. So you only need to worry about ships coming within 200 light years of your planet. Sensor sweep detects industry beyond 15 factories or 20 mines. So anything above those numbers, and they will detect your industrial activity with a sensor sweep, or they have a chance to. But even if you don't have any factories or mines or defense posts or anything, they can still detect the ownership of the planet. They'll still know which race controls that planet. And I want to point out that bioscan is an advanced form of sensor sweep, so that it scans for natives, but it also does a sensor sweep at the same time, so it can detect ownership and it can detect industrial activity. And when you have large quantities of mines, the person gets a message that says that planet is owned by this race and it has heavy industrial activity. And that's the message we're trying to avoid when we're hiding, is you don't want that person to receive that message to know that there's heavy industrial activity, because that means you have a lot of mines there, and it's probably like a Molly planet or a fuel planet or something like that.
Danger, Will Robinson. Danger.
So why are you hiding your planets? I guess there's danger, obviously. Things you want to worry about is that sensor scans can detect your vital production facilities. And that's what we're trying to hide from, is what I just said a second ago with you're avoiding that heavy industrial activity message. And so you might only have one native planet, or sorry, not native, you might only have one Molly planet, you might only have one Duranium planet, one fuel planet. Maybe you have insectoid unity or a really good planet for money, or you have a bovinoid planet, and those are vital to your production. And if you lose those planets, then it can severely cripple you for the rest of the game. And so you want to try to hide those planets, and you do that with defense posts in a certain number of defense posts, which I'll get to in a minute. And the bioscans, obviously, you want to worry about this because they can detect your native colonies. And there's money, there's bovinoid, yes, but there's also like if you're a carrier race and then you have this humanoid planet where you can produce cheap heavy carriers, you don't want to lose that planet either. And it's a target for your enemy. For torpedo races, maybe you don't want to lose a gypsodal planet, so you want to hide from the bioscans. The third thing to worry about is attacker awareness, and this can be important, but it also can be not important, because sometimes if your enemy, maybe it's an alliance, maybe it's a player that's just overwhelmed everybody and they're just going to sweep through and they don't care what they're attacking. They're just plowing through. If that's a situation, attacker awareness almost means nothing. But if it's a situation where the two races are very close and it's a tough fight, every planet matters, every fight matters, then attacker awareness is huge, really important, because you don't want to just plow your way through planets. And in fact, as a player who plays cloakers a lot, I want you to not have attacker awareness, because you're going to come into my traps and whatever. So attacker awareness is knowing where the where the bases are, where the fuel planets are, where the critical money or mineral planets are, and so that's where you're attacking. You're targeting those places. If you know where the fuel is, you're going for the fuel so you can hoard it, so you can attack the rest of it and keep moving, keep your fleet moving. And so attacker awareness is like creating a map for yourself. It's a map to attack, and you know where to go. And so, just a side note, I want to note that the EE are excellent attackers because they're aware of everything. They've seen everything. They know the battlefield. They know where your bases are. They know where your minerals are, and so they're very good at attacking like that. And I did just a small note for the latest Emperor game, the Cognitum match. Teresi's EE Empire very nearly crippled Sokka's Cyborg Empire. It was our current Emperor, and he had his Gorby right outside his territory, and he could have attacked planets. And maybe if he had been able to get a better map of what was going on, that attacker awareness on Sokka's planets, he probably would have been able to severely cripple Sokka. He was very close to, and I think he turned around, and I think he's kicking himself in the butt for doing that. But it could have been a completely different game if he had pushed in. So the hiding sweet spots. This is the formula for finding the percentage chance for a single scan to detect production on the planet. So 100 minus x times 6.66, where x is the number of defense posts. And so I just calculated a few of those out. If you can see the second one there, x equals 15. The chance is 1 in 1,000 scans. So every time one ship does 1,000 scans, there's one chance. So each time, they have a 1 in 1,000 chance each time they make a scan. So if you have 20 ships, each one of those ships has a 1 in 1,000 chance. If you have 14 defense posts, it's 6 times in 100 scans. If you have 13 defense posts, it's 1 time in 10 scans. So you can see that very drastically, very quickly, the chances of being detected go up very quickly. And you can see that if X, or the defense post, is greater than 15, so 16 is your sweet spot, so 16 and higher, there's 0% chance. There's no chance at all, and no chance of detection. So that's your sweet spot, is 16 defense posts. Now, I just want to talk about the 15, 14, 13, because sometimes I've used them, sometimes I've seen other people use them. And you might say, like, well, 1 in 1,000 or 6 in 100, that's a very small chance. You have 94% chance to not be detected, right? So if you think like that, I would challenge that thinking, because the question I would ask you is, are the odds really in your favor? And if you dice, and let's say Snake Eyes, a 1 in a 1, are going to lose, and I bet $10 and I get Snake Eyes and I lose $10, that's not really a big deal, because it's only $10. But if I bet my whole life savings, the end result is much more drastic. The end result is dangerous. The end result could mean my whole life. You know what I mean? So if the chances of rolling Snake Eyes, for me in that case, I would say the odds are not in my favor, because there's nothing positive that can come out of it. So the only thing that could happen is something negative. So what I'm trying to say here is the odds are not in your favor. If we take this in the planets, let's say you have an enemy planet with a minefield around it. I could plow through that planet and attack, and I might get something out of it, but I also might hit, let's say there's 20 light years there. Every light year, I have a chance of hitting a minefield. And so the risk is very dangerous. I might lose my ship. There might be nothing there. It might be a rock. Maybe nobody even owns it. Maybe my scan is old. Or maybe there's a Gorby waiting for me. So the risk there, what do I get out of that? Possibly nothing. So the risk is very big, because it's a very negative risk. So I would say in that situation that the odds are not in your favor, because nothing really good can come of that. Now, if we have another scenario where there's this big super transport freighter with probably minerals and clans and money or whatever heading to that planet, I might say the odds are more in your favor, because Yes, the percentages are still the same. The chances, the odds are all still the same that I might get hit, that I might be, attacked by a Gorby. But the end result is positive, very positive. I might take out a loss of a load of a super transport freighter load is big, so that's a very positive end result. So in this case, I say that the odds are in your favor because of the end result. So you ask yourself, what is it worth the risk? Is the end result a positive thing? So we go back to the defense post, and you have that. If you have only 15 or 14, and you have that 1 in 1,000 or 6 in 100 chance that a ship's going to scan you, you know, yeah, it's a small percent chance that they're going to scan you, but there's nothing positive there. There's only a negative chance, only a chance of something negative happening. There's not a chance of something positive happening, not really. So I would say that the odds are not in your favor. Um, and the end result is not worth the risk. So you really want to use 16 to completely hide yourself. And you ask yourself these questions like, who's my neighbor? Will I be attacked? Is my planet vulnerable? Is it important? Does my race need to hide? Things like that. And is it really worth hiding? Is it really worth the cost of one supply and 160 megacredits to hide myself? So let's look at the defenses at the different stages of the game. I've sort of made 4 different stages. There's the early game, the mid game, and the end game. But I've added another one, which we'll talk about a bit in a minute. So turn 1 to 25 is your early game. That's where you're building. That's where maybe the torpedo races are strongest. And so in this early game, your defense posts, the goal is to hide your critical points and repel scouts. That's the main goal with your defense posts. And so you're looking at 16, 20 to block bio scans. And depending on who you're fighting, you look at their scout and you say, okay, do I need more than 16 defense posts? Do I need 20, 21, 25 maybe? Because 25 is a good spot to boost it because of the beams you get. And so you're looking at how can I repel those scouts. When you get 26 to 80, about there is your mid game. That's where there's fighting all over the map. There's alliances forming all over, alliances breaking. It's kind of a chaotic time in the Echo cluster. And in the mid game, your defense posts need to combine with bases to defend front lines. And you're specifically targeting areas where there's combat, and that's where you're building your defense posts. And you really want to aim for 50 to 100 defense posts. I think any more than that is kind of excessive at this point in the game. It can be a waste because you could lose that spot, you could lose that territory, and then regain it and lose it and regain it. And so and the problem is the clans is to get to 100 defense posts, you need over 2 loads of large D-space freighters. So that 2 loads of 1,200 clans or more to get over defensive posts, and so that's costly in time and fuel, and if you lose it, it can be a bit of a risk. But of course, it depends on the situation, and do you need to really, really defend that spot? But generally speaking, 50 to 100 defense posts in the mid game is pretty good, and it's along your front lines. And then you get the mid game, which is 80 to 150, and this is where the queues kind of clogged a bit, and carrier races start to gain more and more momentum through, and it's harder to stop them. And so again, your defense posts are along your front lines where the fighting is. The fighting is usually, it can be more about alliances at this point. So your borders might even be smaller at this point. The places where you need your defense posts is more important. But also, depending on who you're fighting, like if you're fighting someone with mobility, you might need more defenses at the back of your empire. So it's really dependent on the situation. But your goal here with your defense posts is to create defenses that cause as much damage as possible, especially to the carrier races. And the 4th stage that I've sort of imagined, I guess, in a game I'm calling it the Twilight. And that's when you get to 151 and beyond, where the game is stretching out long, where max defenses are everywhere, max populations are everywhere. And it can be agonizing, and it's really dependent on, and I really feel at the end, at this point, Whoever wins is the one who has gained vassals and subservient allies, and everybody's trying to help that one person to win, really. So I call this the Twilight game or the old man's game, because you're really at this point running out of momentum, and it's kind of a drag. And this is where especially a lot of people drop out. So I really question at this point, does defense really matter? Because chances are the person who's winning has some form of starbase destruction or capture, whether that's SS Destroyer, RGA, or whatever. So I really question whether defenses matter. But essentially, your defenses at this point, you're trying to max everything to do as much damage as possible, especially to the carriers. I think it's worth a debate, worth considering whether or not to build max defenses anyway, because there are a lot of ways to capture a planet without fighting it. So I think it's worth considering, especially depending on who you're fighting. Should I really build defenses or not? And that's something you need to think about, I think, especially like the lizards, right? They can ground capture almost anything. The SS Destroyer can easily capture a planet. So you should definitely consider that. So there's some facts to keep in mind about defenses. A single defense post adds shields to your planet. So in the early game, just one defense post will add shields to your planet. And so it takes longer for some kind of scout to shoot through your shields and shoot through your planet. And planets get a combat mass of 100. So you get shields plus a combat mass of 100, and that often is enough to deter them to keep them from taking your planet. One defense post equals one combat mass. And I'm really going to get into this because I think combat mass in planets is really important, especially when you're talking about your planet. So the more defense posts you have, the tougher your planet is, the tougher your shields are. And so the more combat mass means stronger shields. And when you have stronger shields, the damage, it takes longer for the enemy to shoot through your shields, and so you lose less defense posts. Your planet itself takes less damage, you lose less defense posts, and you're still strong for the next fight. So you want your combat mass up so your shields are strong. And it's also an important fact to remember that clan requirements for defense posts increases exponentially after the first 51 defense posts. So you need 51 clans to get to 51, but after that you need a lot more clans. And so that's a really important thing to remember because it is much harder. Like I said, it takes 2 large deep space freighter loads to get to 100. So that's not as easily done as you might think. So what do all these facts and such mean? That combat mass is important. Defense posts increase combat mass. And so I did a little chart here where you're showing planet combat mass, comparing it to the type of warship that it similar is, that the mass is comparable to that. So what I said, a planet has a base of 100, so it's already stronger than a scout. So you give it a few beams and whatever, and it can take out a scout easily. If you put on 20 defense posts, you're looking at a light cruiser, which is almost equivalent to a Loki or a Meteor, a Cat's Paw, something like that. And so you're aiming, the max you can get to is 666, and that's up, as you can see on the chart there, it's a little high, a little stronger than a heavy carrier, not quite as strong as a Gorby or a Biocide or a Golem, but it's in the battle station status. If you have it up max defenses, you can take out an Automa or a Virgo or Nova and whatnot. And even if you're up that high, you can still severely damage a Gorby or a Biocide. So what you're aiming for is 666 combat mass. And to get there, you need 200 base defense plus 100 combat mass from your planet. So the 200 base defense gives you 200 combat mass. The planet gives you 100 combat mass. And 366 defense posts gives you combat mass, which equals 666 combat mass. But to get there, the 366 DPs, you need 10 million clans. So that is hard to do, but it can happen, and over time you can build those up. So again, what does all this mean? And my main point here is that it means that colony growth is the most effective tactic for defending your territory. So feed your people and get them going. So the increase in clans equals an increase in potential defensive posts, and which also equals an increase in combat mass. So it's best to put your efforts into growing your colonies, getting more colonists so that you can have more defense posts and boost up that combat mass. So feed them, get them going, get them growing, get your terraformers to trade for some, do whatever take them to those planets where there's good temperatures, and so they can grow and then spread out from there, and whatever you need to do to get those clans or those planets growing. That is your best way of defending your territory. And just last, some tips. That there's a lot of things about planetary defenses that I could get into here, but I'm trying to keep it short because you're probably already bored. So some quick tips. If you have money, boost your beam tech because that directly increases the defensive beams. That's a direct effect on how you defend. 27 defense posts on your homeworld is a formidable anti-headshot defense. It doesn't completely stop it, and you often need another ship to help defend your homeworld, but it's not super expensive to boost up to 27, so that's a good, nice, sweet spot for you there. Fighters can only fight 19 at a time, so that's something to consider. Newly built EE bases contain 5 free fighters, so when you build a base, it gives shields to the planet. It has 0 beams, it has 0 fighters, and it has 5 bays. But with the EE, there's an automatic 5 free fighters, so that actually becomes it can be a good defense at short notice to pop up an EE base like that. Small fighter squadron stinks. If you have just a few, they're not going to fight very well. But if you have larger squadrons, they have a greater chance of firing and hitting their targets. So there's a strong defense. They're actually one of the better fighting defenses to choose, but they are costly. But if you're going to buy any, make sure you can put a big chunk of them in, like 20 or 30 or more fighters. Starbase fighters will die first, shielding your ground fighters. So you get fighters from your defense posts, but the ones that you build in your starbase will die first. And this is good because when you lose a planet fighter, you lose a defense post. And that is a bigger loss than just losing a fighter in space. Because the defense post also drops everything else in your defenses and you have to put them back up again. At least that's my take on it. But the boost. This next one, boost your defense post before you boost your base defenses. So if you have this star base, it's better for you to boost up to build more defense posts because your defenses, it'll boost your beam weapons, your type of beams, the amount of bays and fighters you have faster than if you boost up your base defenses. And the base defenses cost a lot of uranium, so sometimes it's best to boost that last. So in order, you want to boost your defense posts, then your fighters, and then you boost your base defenses. And this one I've already said, to get over 100 DPs, you need more than 2 large Seas freighter loads of clans. All right, so that is Tailspin's take on planetary defenses. Thank you for watching and enjoy the con.